Story 1. The Seventh Barn. I'm no stranger to the pull of a good ghost story. Growing up in rural Ohio, where the fields stretch endless and the nights hum with secrets, you hear whispers of places that don't sit right. The kind of places where the air feels heavier, where shadows linger a little too long. The Seventh Barn was one of those, a legend half buried in time, passed around like a warning you don't quite believe, until you're standing in front of it. I didn't set out to chase that story, but it found me anyway. It was late summer, the kind of August where the heat clings to your skin and the cicadas scream until your ears ring. I was 23, restless, and itching for something to break the monotony of small-town life. My buddy Caleb, always chasing a thrill, had heard about the barns from an old-timer at the gas station. 7 barns out past Cuyahoga Falls, the guy had said, eyes glinting like he was daring us to go. 6 for the kids who lived, 1 for the one who didn't. You don't want to mess with the 7th. Caleb, of course, was hooked. He had that grin, the one that meant trouble, and by the next evening, we were in his beat-up truck, chasing a half-remembered map scrawled on a napkin. The drive took us through cornfields and forgotten roads, the kind where the pavement cracks and weeds claw through. The sun was dipping low when we found the place, a sagging farmhouse, its paint peeling like dead skin, surrounded by fields that hadn't been touched in decades. Beyond it, tucked into a grove of gnarled oaks, were the barns. 7 of them, just like the story said. They stood in a rough line, weathered but sturdy, their wood blackened by time. Each had a faded sign above the door. Names barely legible: Elijah, Clara, Samuel, Mary, Abigail, Thomas, and the 7th, just a number, 7. Caleb was already out of the truck, his flashlight beam cutting through the dusk. "This is it," he said, voice buzzing with excitement. "You feel that? Like the air's watching us?" I rolled my eyes, but he wasn't wrong. The place had a weight to it, like the silence was holding its breath. I grabbed my own flashlight and followed him, my boots crunching on the overgrown path. We checked the first 6 barns, their insides reeking of damp hay and rot, old tools rusted in corners and cobwebs draped like curtains. Each one felt empty, hollowed out by time. But the 7th? That was different. The door to the 7th barn was heavier than the others, its hinges groaning like a warning. Inside, the air was thick, stale, like it hadn't been stirred in years. The beam of my flashlight caught dust motes floating lazy in the dark, and the floorboards creaked under our weight. There was nothing much to see, just a cavernous space, a few broken crates, and a ladder leading to a loft. But the feeling was wrong, like we'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. Caleb, oblivious as ever, was already poking around, his light darting over the walls. "Look at this," he called, pointing to a faint carving in the wood. Initials, maybe, or something older. I couldn't make it out, but it made my skin crawl. We should have left then. I wanted to, but Caleb had that look in his eye, the one that said he wasn't done. "Let's stay a bit," he said. "See if the stories are true." I argued, but not hard enough. The truth was, part of me was curious too. So we spread out our sleeping bags in the loft, figuring we'd camp out for a few hours, laugh it off, and head home. The night settled in, heavy and black. The only sounds the creak of the barn and the distant hum of crickets. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I woke to a sound, a low rhythmic thump like someone tapping on the floor below. My flashlight was still in my hand, and I flicked it on, sweeping the beam across the loft. Caleb was gone. His sleeping bag was empty, his boots still sitting by the ladder. "Caleb?" I whispered, my voice swallowed by the dark. The thumping stopped, then started again, louder. I crawled to the edge of the loft and aimed my light down. Nothing, just shadows pooling on the floor like spilled ink. I climbed down, heart hammering, and called his name again. The thumping was coming from the far end of the barn now, near the back wall. I moved toward it, each step heavier than the last. The air felt colder, sharper, like it was pressing against me. When I reached the wall, I saw it, a trapdoor in the floor, half hidden under a pile of rotting hay. The thumping was coming from below. I don't know why I opened it. I should have run. But I lifted the trapdoor, and a wave of damp, earthy air hit me, carrying a smell like old blood. The hole was pitch black, but my flashlight caught the edge of a wooden ladder leading down. The thumping was louder now, insistent, like a heartbeat. I called for Caleb again, my voice cracking. No answer. I don't know what made me climb down. Maybe I thought he was hurt. Maybe I wasn't thinking at all. The ladder groaned under my weight, and the air grew colder with every rung. At the bottom, I found a dirt-walled cellar, the beam of my light barely cutting through the dark. And there, in the center, was Caleb. He was standing, facing away from me, his flashlight dangling limp in his hand. The thumping was coming from him, his foot tapping against the dirt floor, slow and deliberate. "Caleb?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't turn, didn't move, except for that steady tap, tap, tap. I stepped closer, my light shaking in my hand, and that's when I saw it. His face, pale and slack, eyes wide and empty, staring at nothing. He wasn't alone. The shadows around him moved, not like shadows should, but like they had weight, purpose. They curled around his legs, his arms, like tendrils of smoke. I stumbled back, my light catching glimpses of shapes, hands, faces, things that weren't there but were. The thumping stopped, and Caleb's head snapped toward me, his eyes still blank. He didn't speak, but the air did. A low guttural sound, like a voice trying to form words it didn't know. I ran. I scrambled up the ladder, my hands slipping on the rungs, the trapdoor slamming shut behind me. The barn felt smaller now, the walls closer, the air thicker. I bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The handle was cold, unyielding, like it was welded shut. Behind me, the thumping started again, closer now, mixed with a scraping sound, like something dragging itself across the floor. I turned, my flashlight beam wild, catching nothing but empty space. But I could feel it, something watching, waiting, just out of sight. I don't know how I got out. One minute I was pounding on the door, the next I was outside, the night air hitting me like a slap. The barn loomed behind me, silent now, its door hanging open like it had never been locked. I ran to the truck, my hand shaking so bad I could barely get the keys in the ignition. I drove until the sun came up, not looking back. Caleb didn't come home. I told the cops everything, but they didn't believe me. They searched the farm, the barns, the cellar. They found nothing. No trapdoor, no carvings, no sign of Caleb. Just an empty barn with a faded sign that read 7. They called it a runaway case, said he'd probably turn up. He didn't. I moved away after that, put as many miles as I could between me and that place. But the story followed me. Whispers in bars, rumors in diners. They say the seventh barn is still out there waiting. They say it calls to people, draws them in. I don't know if that's true, but sometimes when the night is too quiet, I hear it. That low rhythmic thump, like a heartbeat in the dark. And I know wherever I go, it's still waiting for me. Story 2. Haunted voices in old farmhouses. The air in the old Quebec farmhouse was thick with the scent of aged wood and damp earth, the kind that clings to your clothes and seeps into your bones. It was the 1970s when my parents bought the place, a sprawling, creaky relic of a house that seemed to lean into the wind on the edge of a forgotten field. I was barely 5, small enough to notice things adults ignored. The way the floorboards groaned under no one's weight, or how the shadows in the corners seemed to shift just out of sight. The house was alive in a way I couldn't explain, and it spoke to me. At night, when the world went quiet, the voices started. They weren't loud, not like someone shouting or whispering secrets in a crowded room. They were soft, like a breath against the back of your neck, slipping into my room through the cracks in the walls. As a toddler, I'd lie in my bed, clutching a stuffed rabbit, listening to words I didn't understand. Strange, old words that felt heavy, like they belonged to another time. I'd babble about them to my mother during breakfast, my tiny hands waving as I tried to describe the voices in my bedroom. She'd smile, ruffle my hair, and say I had a big imagination, but her eyes would flicker just for a moment when I repeated the words, sharp, unfamiliar syllables that no child should know. She'd ask where I heard them, and I'd point to the walls, the ceiling, and the air. They just come, I'd say. She'd never heard them. No one did. Not my father, not my older brother, not the neighbors who'd drop by with casseroles to welcome us. Just me. I remember one night vividly. The moon was a sliver outside my window, casting a pale glow across the floor. I woke up to the voices again, clearer this time, like a chorus of murmurs weaving together. They weren't angry or kind, just there, pulling at my attention. I sat up, heart pounding, and whispered, "Who are you?" The room went silent, so still I could hear my own breathing. Then a single word drifted back, soft as a sigh. "Listen." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't tell my mother about that one either. Something about it felt private, like a secret meant only for me. Years passed, and we left the Quebec farmhouse when I was 12. My parents sold it after my father got a job in the city, and I thought the voices were gone for good, left behind with the peeling wallpaper and the sagging porch. Life moved on. School, friends, the chaos of growing up. I buried those memories, convincing myself they were just a child's fancy, a story I'd told myself to make the dark less lonely, but the voices weren't done with me. Decades later, I found myself in another old farmhouse, this one in Ontario, inherited by my husband from his parents. It was a sturdy place, built from gray stone and timber, with wide windows that let in too much light and an attic that smelled of dust and forgotten things. We moved in after our wedding, me and my 2 daughters, hoping for a fresh start. The house was beautiful in its own weathered way, but it had a weight to it, like it was watching us settle in, sizing us up. The first sign came at Christmas, when my youngest daughter, Lily, was 4. She was napping in the attic bedroom, a cozy space we'd turned into a guest room with a slanted ceiling and a single rocking chair in the corner. I was downstairs, stirring soup on the stove, when Lily came running down, her face pale and her eyes wide. "Mommy," she said, tugging at my sleeve, "why is there an old lady sitting on the chair watching me sleep?" My stomach dropped. I followed her upstairs, half expecting to find nothing, but hoping I wouldn't. The room was empty, the chair still. I asked her to describe the lady. Gray hair, a long dress, eyes that didn't blink. I checked every corner, under the bed, even the closet, but there was no one. My husband's mother, who'd lived in the house for decades, overheard us and went quiet. Without a word, she dragged the chair out of the room and down to the basement, muttering about old furniture and bad vibes. She never explained, and I didn't ask. That should have been my warning, but I brushed it off. Kids see things, I told myself. The house was old, full of quirks, creaking pipes, drafts that moved the curtains. But then the footsteps started. It was late spring, the air heavy with the promise of summer. My husband's relatives were visiting, staying in the guest rooms while we slept in the master bedroom downstairs. One night, I woke to the sound of slow, deliberate steps climbing the staircase. The house was silent otherwise, no wind, no hum of appliances. Just those steps, thud, 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 each one louder than the last. I sat up listening, my heart racing. They weren't hurried or sneaky, just steady like someone who knew exactly where they were going. I nudged my husband, but he was already awake, staring at the ceiling. "You hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. We grabbed flashlights and crept to the base of the stairs, expecting to see one of his cousins wandering in the dark. But the hallway was empty. The steps stopped at the top, right above us, and then nothing. No doors opened, no floorboards creaked, just silence. The next morning, his cousins were shaken. They'd heard it too, every one of them, and they'd checked the upstairs rooms, armed with lamps and a baseball bat. No one was there. They left the next day, refusing to stay another night. "That house isn't right," one of them said as they packed their car. I didn't argue. Life in the Ontario farmhouse grew tense after that. My husband's parents, who lived nearby, started visiting more often, their presence heavy with unspoken judgments. They'd comment on how I raised the girls, how I kept the house, how I wasn't fitting in with their family. The air felt charged, like a storm was brewing, and the house seemed to notice. It started at 5:55 a.m. I'd wake up every morning to a soft voice saying, "Hey." It was faint, feminine, so close it felt like someone was leaning over my face. I'd jolt upright, scanning the room, but it was always empty. My husband snoring softly, the girls asleep down the hall. The first few times I thought I was dreaming, but it kept happening, night after night, always at 5:55. The voice never said more, just that single word, sharp and clear, like a nudge to wake me up. I started dreading sleep, lying awake, watching the clock tick closer to that hour. When it hit, there it was. "Hey," and my eyes would snap open, my skin prickling. I tried to ignore it, but it gnawed at me. One night, I searched online for anything about the number 555. The results were strange. Some sites said it meant change was coming, something unexpected. Others were darker, warning to get out now. I laughed it off at first, but the voice didn't stop, and the unease grew. The house felt heavier, the shadows sharper. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the corners of my eyes, but when I turned, nothing was there. The girls started acting strange too. Lily stopped playing in the attic, and my older daughter, Emma, said the basement gave her bad feeling. I couldn't shake the sense that the house was trying to tell me something. Things came to a head that summer. The tension with my in-laws had reached a breaking point. Snide comments, cold stares, whispers when they thought I wasn't listening. One morning, after another 5:55 wake-up call, I decided to take the girls and visit my parents for a week, just to get some space. As we drove out of town, my phone buzzed with a flood of emails from my in-laws. They were vicious, accusing me of things I'd never done, demanding we leave the farmhouse for good. It was like they'd been waiting for us to go so they could push us out. My husband tried to mediate, but it was clear. We weren't welcome anymore. We never went back. We found a small apartment in town, and I packed up our things while the girls stayed with my parents. The farmhouse sat empty after that, or so I heard. Part of me wonders if it was waiting for someone new to listen to its secrets. Looking back, I think the voices were trying to warn me. As a child in Quebec, I'd heard them, felt their presence, and they'd never hurt me. They just wanted me to listen. In Ontario, they came back, sharper, more urgent, like they knew what was coming. That soft hey at 5:55 wasn't a threat. It was a nudge, a heads up that trouble was brewing. The old lady in the attic, the footsteps on the stairs, they weren't there to scare us. They were there to protect us, to push us out before the real harm came from the living. I feel sorry for those ghosts, stuck in that house, whispering to walls that don't answer. I hope they find someone else who listens. Story 3, The Bell Witch's Curse. My name is Elizabeth Bell, though folks around here call me Betsy. I'm telling you this story because I lived it every chilling moment, and I reckon it's time the truth came out, raw and unvarnished, about what haunted our farm in Tennessee. It started in the summer of 1817, when I was just a girl, and it never really ended. Not for me, not for my family, not for this cursed land. Listen close, because what I'm about to tell you ain't just a tale to spook children. It's real, and it's still out there waiting. We'd been on our Red River farm since 1804, my father John, my mother Lucy, and us kids. Life was hard, but good. Fields to tend, livestock to raise, a roof over our heads. For 13 years, we carved out a living unbothered by anything worse than a bad harvest or a sick cow. Then that summer, something changed. It was like the air itself turned sour, heavy with a feeling I couldn't name. At first it was small things. A creak in the floorboards when nobody was walking. A thump on the roof, like something heavy fell, but nothing was there when we looked. Scratching sounds, sharp and deliberate, coming from inside the walls. We thought maybe animals, rats, possums, but traps stayed empty, and the noises grew louder, meaner. One night, I woke to my blanket being yanked off my bed. I sat up, heart pounding, but the room was empty. Just moonlight spilling through the window, casting long shadows. I told myself I'd dreamed it, but the blanket was crumpled on the floor, too far for me to have kicked it. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, my brother Drury said he'd heard whispers in his room, words he couldn't make out, like someone was talking just beyond the wall. My father brushed it off, said old houses make noises, but I saw the worry in his eyes. The disturbances got worse. By August, the noises weren't just noises anymore. They were attacks. Something invisible started tormenting us. and it seemed to hate me and Father worst of all. I'd feel a sharp pinch on my arm, hard enough to bruise, but nobody was near me. Once I screamed when something stabbed my shoulder like a needle driven deep. I tore off my dress expecting blood, but there was only a red mark, angry and swollen. Father wasn't spared either. He'd be fine one moment, then clutch his throat, gasping like something was choking him. His face would turn red, his eyes wild, and he'd shake until it passed. Mother would hold him, helpless, while we kids watched, too scared to move. One night, it spoke. I was in bed, the house quiet, when a voice, low, raspy, like it came from the earth itself, filled my room. "Betsy," it said, "you'll never know peace." I froze, my breath caught in my chest. The voice laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "I'm here now, and I ain't leaving." I screamed for my parents, but when they burst in, the voice was gone. They didn't hear it, but they saw my face, pale as death, and knew I wasn't lying. From then on, the thing, what folks later called the Bell Witch, never shut up. It mocked us, cursed us, told us things it shouldn't know. It knew my thoughts, my fears, secrets I'd never spoken aloud. It'd sing awful songs in the dead of night, its voice echoing through the house, or mimic my mother's voice calling me from the fields, only for me to find nobody there. Sometimes it took shape, not clear, but enough to make your blood run cold. I saw it once as a dog, black as coal, with eyes like burning embers, watching me from the edge of the woods. Another time, it was a shadow in the shape of a woman standing at the foot of my bed, staring with no face. It hated Father most of all. It said he'd done wrong, though it never said what, and it swore to destroy him. Father grew weaker, his choking spells more frequent. He'd sit by the fire trembling, his hands clutching his throat as the witch's voice taunted him. "John Bell," it'd say, "your time's coming." It tormented me too, especially after I got engaged to Joshua Gardner, a kind man from a nearby farm. The witch despised him. "Break it off, Betsy," it hissed, "or I'll make you suffer." When I didn't listen, it got worse. It'd pull my hair, slap my face, leave welts on my skin. Once, it screamed so loud in my ear I thought my head would split. The attacks weren't just in the house. One day, I was walking by the river when the air turned cold, unnatural for summer. The witch's voice whispered, "Look down, Betsy." Against my will I did, and saw my reflection in the water. But it wasn't me. The face was twisted, eyes hollow, mouth stretched in a scream. I stumbled back, and the water rippled, erasing the image. I ran home, sobbing, and didn't leave the house for days. By 1820, Father was a shadow of himself. He could barely work the fields, and the witch's attacks grew bolder. It'd knock plates off the table, fling chairs across the room, make the walls shake with its laughter. Neighbors came to help, thinking maybe they could reason with whatever this was. But the witch mocked them too, calling out their secrets till they fled. One night it told me, clear as day, "John Bell dies tomorrow." I begged Father to leave, to go anywhere, but he was too weak, too broken. He just shook his head and said, "Betsy, it's got me." The next morning, December 20th, 1820, I found him. He was in his bed, still his face gray, a small vial beside him, empty. The air in the room was thick, like something was watching. The witch's voice came then, soft and triumphant. "I did it, Betsy. He's gone." I screamed, my knees buckling, as my mother rushed in. We buried Father the next day, and the witch was silent. for a while. After Father's death, the haunting stopped, sudden as they'd started. The house was quiet, the air lighter, but the damage was done. I broke off my engagement with Joshua, too afraid of what the witch might do. We tried to move on, but the land felt tainted. Folks started saying the witch had moved to a cave on our property, a dark, twisting place we'd always avoided. I never went near it, but others did, and they came back with stories. A group of children got lost in there once, trapped for hours until a voice, soft, almost kind, guided them out. They said it told them, "Don't come back." I knew that voice. It wasn't kind. It was playing with them like it played with us. Years passed, but the witch never left. Visitors came, drawn by the stories, and some swore they heard it. Whispers, laughter, footsteps in the cave. Even a man as brave as Andrew Jackson, who stopped by once, left shaken, vowing never to return. I stayed on the farm, bound by some fool sense of duty, but I never knew peace. At night, I'd hear it sometimes, faint but clear, calling my name. "Betsy," it'd whisper, "I'm still here. I'm old now, and this land's all I've got left. The cave's still there, and so's the witch, waiting for whoever's fool enough to cross her. I don't know what she is or why she came, but I know this. She's real, and she's hungry. If you ever find yourself near the Red River, steer clear of that cave. And if you hear a voice calling your name, don't answer. Run, and don't look back." Story 4. The Haunted Farmhouse. The old farmhouse sat at the edge of town, a crumbling relic swallowed by overgrown fields and shadowed by gnarled trees. Its windows were black voids. The paint peeled like dead skin, and the air around it felt heavy, as if the place itself exhaled dread. My best friend Jake and I had heard the stories since we were kids, whispers of strange noises, fleeting shadows, and a lingering unease that kept the locals away. To us, though, it wasn't a warning. It was a challenge. We were 17, restless, and obsessed with the idea of capturing something unexplainable on camera. So, one crisp October afternoon, we grabbed Jake's old camcorder and set out to investigate. The plan was simple: scout the property during the day, map out the layout, and maybe catch something weird on tape. Jake drove us out in his beat-up truck, the engine rattling as we bounced along the dirt road. The farmhouse loomed ahead, its sagging roof and broken porch looking even worse up close. A rusted trailer sat off to the side, half buried in weeds, its door hanging open like a slack jaw. "This place is creepy as hell," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out tight. Jake grinned, his eyes glinting with excitement. Perfect for our ghost hunting debut. He hefted the camcorder, already recording as we stepped out. The air was chilly, but it wasn't just the autumn breeze. It felt like the cold was seeping up from the ground. We started with the trailer, figuring it was less intimidating than the house. Inside, it was empty, except for a few broken chairs and a layer of dust so thick it crunched under our sneakers. Jake panned the camera slowly, narrating in a mock-serious tone. October 12th, 3:17 p.m. No signs of spectral activity yet. As we left the trailer and headed toward the farmhouse, Jake lowered the camera and glanced at me. "You know, I came here once before last summer," he said, "with some other guys." We went inside, just messing around, and we each tore off a piece of wallpaper from the living room, like a trophy. I raised an eyebrow. "And?" He hesitated, his grin fading. 3 of us got this weird rash the next day. Red, itchy, like something was crawling under our skin. The one guy who didn't take any wallpaper, he was fine. I stopped walking, my stomach twisting. You're saying the house cursed you or something? Jake shrugged, but his eyes darted toward the farmhouse. I'm just saying it was weird. We didn't come back after that. I wanted to laugh it off, but the story stuck with me as we approached the front porch. The door was ajar, creaking faintly in the wind. Inside, the house smelled of mildew and decay. The floorboards groaned under our weight, and every step kicked up clouds of dust that swirled in the dim light, filtering through cracked windows. We moved through the living room, where faded wallpaper hung in strips, and into a narrow hallway. Jake kept the camera rolling, capturing every detail, the warped furniture, the cobwebs, the eerie stillness. Then we heard it, a faint, metallic scraping sound like a knife dragging across a pipe. We froze. You hear that? I whispered. Jake nodded, his face pale. It's coming from upstairs. We stood there listening, but the sound didn't come again. My heart was pounding, but I forced a laugh. Probably just the wind or something. Yeah, Jake said, but he didn't sound convinced. We kept going, our footsteps louder now, like the house was amplifying every noise. The staircase to the second floor was narrow, the wood splintered and soft. Each step felt like it might collapse under us. At the top, we found a hallway lined with closed doors. At the end was a trapdoor in the ceiling leading to the attic. Let's check it out, Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to, but I couldn't back out now. We pulled the trapdoor down, revealing a rickety ladder. The attic was dark, the air thick with the smell of old wood and something sour I couldn't place. Jake went first, the camera's light casting shaky beams across the rafters. I followed, my hands sweaty on the ladder rungs. The attic was cramped, with sloping ceilings and piles of forgotten junk. Boxes, a broken chair, a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. We stood there, the silence pressing in. When it happened, I heard a voice, faint and clear, like it was whispered right into my ear. Help me. It was a child's voice, soft and desperate. My blood turned to ice. At the exact same moment, Jake gasped. Did you hear that? What? I croaked, my throat dry. Chimes, like a clock. He swung the camera around, his eyes wide. It was right here, man. I shook my head. I didn't hear chimes. I heard something else. We stared at each other, the air between us electric with fear. Then, without a word, we scrambled down the ladder, practically falling over each other to get out of the house. We didn't stop until we were back at the truck, panting and shaking. Jake fumbled with the camcorder, rewinding the tape to check what we'd caught. My stomach dropped as we watched. The footage showed us entering the house, moving through the rooms, climbing to the attic, but then it cut off. Everything from the moment we heard that scraping sound to when we reached the truck was gone. Not static, not corrupted, just missing, like someone had sliced it out of existence. Dude, Jake whispered, what the hell is this place? We didn't talk much on the drive back. The farmhouse stayed in my head, though, like a splinter I couldn't pull out. A week later, Jake called me up. We gotta go back, he said. At night. Bring your brother. I didn't want to, but Jake was insistent, and my little brother Max overheard and begged to come along. He was 14, fearless in that dumb way kids are, and I couldn't say no. So, that Friday night, we piled into Jake's truck and headed back. The farmhouse looked different in the dark. Bigger, somehow, and wrong. The fields around it seemed to swallow the moonlight, leaving everything cloaked in an unnatural blackness. Even the stars felt dim. We parked a ways off and approached on foot, our flashlights barely cutting through the gloom. Max clung to my side, his bravado fading. "This place is messed up," he muttered. "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "Stay close." We stood at the edge of the property, staring at the farmhouse. The windows were pitch black, like they were sucking in the light. My skin prickled, and every instinct screamed at me to leave. Jake took a step forward, but I grabbed his arm. "You sure about this?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "Nah, man, I can't." Max tugged at my sleeve. "Can we go? Please?" We turned back toward the truck, the weight of the darkness pressing on us. As we walked, Max stopped dead. "What?" I asked, turning to him. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on the farmhouse. "I saw a face in the window, a kid, all white, staring at us." I spun around, but the windows were empty. My heart hammered. "You're seeing things," I said, trying to sound calm. Jake's voice was barely audible. "I saw it too." We ran to the truck, piling in and peeling out without looking back. Max was quiet the whole way home, his hands shaking. None of us talked about it after that, but the farmhouse wasn't done with us. A month later, Jake called me in the middle of the night, his voice ragged. "I went back," he said. "Alone?" "What? Why?" I demanded, already dreading his answer. "I don't know, man. I was pissed. My girlfriend dumped me, and I went to the farmhouse to feel something else. I climbed up to the attic and..." He paused, his breathing uneven. Something was there. Something pale. It screamed at me, this awful, high-pitched screech, and it moved, like it was coming for me. I ran, dude. I ran, and I'm never going back. That was the last time we talked about the farmhouse. Jake moved away a few months later, and I never drove down that road again. The fields and buildings are still there, empty and silent, but I know something's watching from inside those walls. Something that doesn't let go. Story 5. The Haunted Barn. The air was thick with the scent of hay and leather as I stepped into Sarah's sprawling equestrian barn, the wooden beams creaking under the weight of decades. My boots crunched up the dirt floor, and the faint whinny of horses echoed from the stalls. It was just past dusk, and the fading light cast long shadows that danced across the walls like restless spirits. My friend Darcy nudged me, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and unease. "You sure about this, Courtney?" she whispered, clutching her flashlight. I forced a grin, though my stomach churned. "It's just a ghost hunt. Probably nothing but old barn noises." But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Sarah, the barn's owner, and a no-nonsense equestrian trainer had invited us to join a midnight investigation. For years, she'd shared stories of strange happenings, horses spooking for no reason, odd shadows flickering in the arena, and whispers in the dark when no one else was around. The most chilling tale was about a Confederate soldier, a ghostly figure she'd seen leaning against a stall, his gray uniform tattered but vivid, his eyes hollow yet piercing. She described him as clear as day, only vanishing when she shouted at him in frustration. That story alone was enough to make my skin prickle. But when Sarah mentioned her brother's ghost-detecting gear picking up a thrashing figure in the arena, where nothing visible stood, I couldn't resist. Skeptic or not, curiosity had me hooked. The barn loomed larger in the dark, its weathered walls swallowing the moonlight. A group of paranormal investigators had already set up, their equipment scattered across a folding table. Audio recorders, motion sensors, and a strange device they called a spirit box that supposedly let spirits speak through static. Sarah greeted us, her face lit by the glow of a lantern. "Ready to meet our soldier?" she asked, half joking, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. I laughed it off, but Darcy gripped my arm tighter. We started in the main aisle, lined with stalls where horses shifted restlessly. The investigators instructed us to stay quiet and listen. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional snort of a horse or the creak of the barn settling. One of the investigators, a wiry man named Tom, held up the spirit box, its static hissing like a distant storm. "If there's anyone here," he called into the darkness, "can you tell us your name?" The static crackled, but nothing came through. I rolled my eyes at Darcy, whispering, "Told you, just a fancy radio." Then Darcy, always the bold one, stepped forward. "Do you like the horses?" she asked, her voice steady but loud in the quiet barn. The spirit box sputtered, and a low, gravelly voice cut through the static. "I do." My heart stopped. The words were clear, unmistakable, as if someone had leaned into the device and spoken. Darcy gasped, and even Tom looked startled, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, my skepticism crumbling like dry hay. The horses in the nearest stall snorted and pawed at the ground, their eyes wide with alarm. We moved deeper into the barn, toward the arena where Sarah's brother had recorded that thrashing figure. The air grew colder, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones. My flashlight beam swept across the sandy floor, revealing nothing but hoof prints and shadows. Tom set up a motion sensor in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. "If anything moves, this'll catch it," he said. We waited, the silence pressing against my ears. Then a faint scuffing sound came from above, like boots dragging across wood. My eyes darted to the hayloft, a dark, gaping space accessible only by a rickety ladder. "Did you hear that?" Darcy whispered, her voice barely audible. Before anyone could answer, the camera crew, stationed near the arena's edge, froze. "Footsteps!" one of them hissed, pointing upward, and something else. A metallic rattle echoed from the hayloft, like a chain being dragged across the floor. My pulse raced. Sarah's face paled, but she nodded toward the ladder. "We should check it out," she said, her voice firm despite the tension. Tom and two other investigators volunteered, their flashlights bobbing as they climbed the creaking ladder. The rest of us waited below, holding our breath. Minutes passed, each one stretching into eternity. The investigators' footsteps thudded above, then stopped. "Nothing up here," Tom called down, but his voice wavered. The rattling chain sounded again, louder this time, followed by a low guttural moan that made my skin crawl. The horses in the stalls went wild, kicking at their doors, their whinnies piercing the night. Darcy grabbed my hand, her nails digging into my palm. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. I had no answer, only a growing sense of dread. The investigators descended, their faces ashen. No one's up there, Tom said, his voice low. But the sounds, they were right next to us, like someone was pacing, dragging something heavy. He held up his audio recorder, replaying a faint clip. Amid the static, I heard it, a rhythmic thump, 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 and the unmistakable clank of metal. My stomach twisted. There was no explanation for it. No loose boards, no stray animals, nothing. We regrouped near the stalls, trying to shake off the unease. One of the investigators, a woman named Lisa, suggested lightening the mood. "Let's ask something silly," she said, turning on the spirit box again. "Hey, spirit," she called, a grin on her face. "You like pirates?" The device crackled, and the needle jumped to red, the static spiking wildly. We laughed nervously, but Lisa tried again. "Pirates, huh? You a fan?" Again, the needle pegged to red, the static roaring. "Okay, that's weird," Lisa muttered, her smile fading. Darcy, ever the skeptic, chimed in. "Maybe it's a kid who loves pirate stories." The device screeched. The needle stuck at red as if agreeing. The idea of a child's ghost was oddly comforting, less menacing than a soldier, but the barn's oppressive atmosphere didn't let me relax. As the night wore on, the strange occurrences piled up. A stall door swung open on its own, creaking slowly despite being latched. My flashlight flickered even though I'd checked the batteries that morning. And once, when I lagged behind the group, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck, like someone was standing just behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but no one was there. Darcy noticed my panic and pulled me close. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. By 3 a.m., the barn felt alive with unseen eyes. Every creak, every rustle made my nerves fray. The investigators set up a thermal camera, hoping to catch something visual. We watched the screen, a grainy mix of blues and purples. But nothing appeared. Then, out of nowhere, a shape flickered, a vague, human-like outline near the arena's edge. It was gone in a second, but the camera crew swore they saw it too. "That wasn't a horse," Tom said, his voice tight. "Too tall, too deliberate." We pushed on, determined to see the night through. Sarah led us to the stall where she'd seen the soldier. It was empty now, the horse relocated after too many spooked nights. The air here was heavier, like stepping into a fog. Tom swept the spirit box across the stall, asking, "Are you the soldier? Why are you here?" The static hissed, then spat out a single word. "Duty!" My blood ran cold. The horses nearby snorted, their hooves stomping as if sensing something we couldn't. The final hour was the worst. As dawn approached, the barn seemed to resist our presence. Footsteps echoed from every direction, circling us like predators. The chain in the hayloft rattled again, louder, more insistent. The spirit box began spitting out random words. Run, hide, watch, each one sending a jolt through me. Darcy clung to my arm, her bravado gone. Even Sarah, who'd lived with these stories for years, looked rattled. "Maybe we should call it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We packed up as the first light of dawn crept through the barn's windows, casting pale rays across the dirt floor. The sound stopped, the air lightened, and the horses calmed. We left in silence, our flashlights no longer needed. I glanced back at the barn, its dark silhouette looming against the gray sky. I wanted to dismiss it all. Random noises, faulty equipment, my own imagination. But that voice, those footsteps, the cold breath on my neck, they lingered gnawing at my skepticism. Story 6. The Acreage ghost. The air was crisp that autumn evening, carrying the faint scent of hay and earth across our 7.5-acre goat farm. My aunt, Clara, was out by the pens, her boots crunching on the gravel as she herded the goats in for the night. The sky was bruising purple, and the world felt quiet. Too quiet. She swung the gate shut, the metal clanging into place, when a voice sliced through the stillness. "Hi, goats! Hi, goats! Goaty, goaty, goaties!" It was high-pitched, childlike, almost playful, but with an eerie edge that made her skin prickle. Clara froze, her hand still on the gate. She scanned the field, the shadows of the trees stretching long and thin. No one was there. The goats, usually calm, stamped and bleated, their eyes wide and darting. Clara called out, her voice shaky, "Who's there?" Silence answered, heavy and unbroken. She locked the pen and hurried back to the house, her heart pounding. When she told us, my mom and I exchanged glances. We lived alone out here, me, Mom, Clara, and my 2 little cousins, Sophie and Ellie. No neighbors for miles, just us and the animals. We brushed it off as exhaustion, maybe the wind playing tricks. But the goat's agitation lingered in my mind. A week later, my older brother Ethan was out checking on the baby chicks in the same field. It was dusk, the light fading fast, and he was tossing feed into their coop when that same voice, high, girlish, unsettling, called out, "Here, chickie, chickie, chickies!" Ethan dropped the feed bucket, the clatter startling the chicks into a flurry of feathers. He spun around, expecting to see Sophie or Ellie sneaking around, but the field was empty. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against him. He shouted, "Cut it out!" But his words fell flat, swallowed by the open space. The chicks huddled together, their tiny peeps frantic. Ethan didn't wait around. He bolted back to the house, his face pale, when he burst through the door. "I heard it," he said, voice low. That voice Clara talked about. "It's real." Mom frowned, her hands pausing over the cutting board where she was chopping carrots. "You're sure it wasn't the girls?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. Sophie and Ellie were inside, sprawled on the living room floor with crayons and paper. We checked. They hadn't left the house. The farm started to feel different after that. The air seemed heavier, the shadows sharper. We didn't talk about it much, but I noticed Mom double-checking the locks at night. Clara started carrying a flashlight even when it wasn't fully dark. We laughed it off, calling it our Acreage ghost, a half-joking way to explain the unease creeping into our days. A missing shovel. The ghost took it. A gate left unlatched. Blame the ghost. But the humor felt thin, like a thread about to snap. 3 weeks later, I got my first taste of it. My cousin Lila, Clara's oldest, was visiting for the weekend. We were on the back deck, the night air cool against our skin, the stars sharp overhead. The farm was quiet, save for the occasional bleat from the goat pen. Then, out of nowhere, a voice drifted through the darkness, a young woman's voice, soft and melodic, singing a wordless tune. It wasn't loud, but it was clear, like it was coming from just beyond the deck. Lila and I froze, our eyes locking. "You heard that, right?" I whispered. She nodded, her face pale. We turned toward the sound, straining to see into the inky black beyond the porch light's glow. Nothing, no movement, no figure, just the endless stretch of field and trees. The singing stopped as suddenly as it started, leaving a silence that felt alive, like it was watching us. We ran inside, slamming the door behind us. My heart was racing, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the lock. Lila didn't speak, but her wide eyes said enough. That was the first time I heard it, the first time I knew something was wrong. Dad, who'd been away on a work trip, came home the next day. We told him everything. The voice with the goats, the chicks, the singing. He didn't laugh it off like I expected. Instead, he went quiet, his jaw tight. That night, I saw him place a baseball bat by the back door. "Just in case," he said, his voice gruff. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to. Things got worse. A month after the singing, Clara and Mom were out in the goat barn, repairing a broken latch. I was in the house with Sophie and Ellie, helping them with a puzzle. The barn was only 50 yards from the house, close enough that I'd have heard if they called for me, but they didn't call, not with their own voices at least. When they came back, their faces were ashen. Clara's hands were shaking as she set her tools down. "We heard you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I frowned. "What you mean? I was here the whole time." Mom shook her head, her eyes fixed on me. "We heard your voice, Mia, outside the barn calling the dogs. You said their names, Rusty, Bella, clear as day." My stomach dropped. I hadn't left the house. Sophie and Ellie were right there with me, giggling over their puzzle pieces. There was no way I'd been outside, but they insisted the voice was mine, identical in every way, my tone, my cadence, even the way I drawled Rusty's name. It had come from just beyond the barn walls, they said, but when they opened the door, no one was there. The dogs, usually quick to bound toward any call, had stayed put, whining softly. Clara said the barn door had felt stuck, like something was holding it shut, trapping them inside for a few agonizing minutes. They only got out when the feeling lifted, like a weight being pulled away. That was when the Acreage ghost stopped being a joke. We didn't laugh about missing tools anymore. We didn't go outside alone at night. The farm, once our sanctuary, felt like it was watching us, waiting. I started noticing things, small things at first. The goats would suddenly huddle together in their pen, staring at nothing. The chicks would go silent, their usual peeping cut off like a switch. Once, I found the barn door wide open in the morning, though I'd locked it myself the night before. We tried to rationalize it. Maybe the wind, maybe faulty locks. But deep down, we knew better. The worst came one night in early winter. I was on the deck with Rusty, our Rottweiler, and Bella, our Great Pyrenees. The air was sharp, the kind of cold that stings your lungs. I was tossing a ball for them, their breaths puffing out in clouds, when Rusty stopped dead. His head snapped toward the far corner of the deck, where the light didn't quite reach. His lips curled back, and a low guttural growl rumbled from his throat. I followed his gaze, but there was nothing, just an empty corner, the wooden railing, and the dark field beyond. Bella, usually fearless, whined and backed toward the door, her tail tucked. Then I heard it, thumping footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from the grass just beyond the deck. They were slow, like someone or something was walking toward us. I strained my eyes, searching for a shape, a shadow, anything. The night was still, no wind, no rustling leaves, just those footsteps growing louder, closer. Rusty's growl turned into a snarl, his body rigid. Bella bolted inside, her claws scrabbling on the wood. My heart was in my throat, my legs frozen. The footsteps stopped. right at the edge of the deck, and the air felt thick like it was pressing against my chest. I didn't wait to find out what came next. I grabbed Rusty's collar, dragged him inside, and slammed the door, locking it with shaking hands. I stood there panting, listening for the footsteps to start again. They didn't. The night was silent. After that, the strange occurrences tapered off. No more voices, no more singing, no more footsteps. The animals settled down, their nervous energy fading, but the farm never felt the same. We still check the locks twice at night. Dad still keeps the bat by the door. Sometimes, when I'm out by the goat pen at dusk, I catch myself listening, waiting for that childlike voice to call out again. It hasn't, not yet. Story 7. The Farmhouse Shadow. The farmhouse had stood on that patch of earth since 1870, built on the ashes of an older structure that burned down in the 1700s. My family had owned it for generations, and by the time I was born it was already a creaking, sagging relic of another era. The walls groaned at night, the floors tilted underfoot, and the air always carried a faint, musty chill, no matter how warm the day. I was 6 when I first felt it, a presence, like someone standing just out of sight, watching. It wasn't a thought I could explain, just a certainty that settled into my bones. I'd lie in bed, facing the wall, my back prickling with the sense that something was hovering behind me. I never turned to look. I was too afraid of what I might see. Small things happened at first, so subtle I could almost dismiss them. A book I'd left on my desk would be on the floor when I returned. My hairbrush would vanish, only to reappear on a shelf I couldn't reach. Once, I set an empty glass on the kitchen counter, turned to grab a towel, and when I looked back, it was filled to the brim with water. I stared at it, my heart thudding, knowing I hadn't touched the faucet. I dumped the water out and didn't tell anyone. Who would believe a kid? By the time I was a teenager, the house felt heavier, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. My shoes started disappearing. I'd leave them by the door, and the next morning, they'd be gone. Once, I found them in my room, stacked in a neat pile in the center of the floor, though I'd been downstairs all morning. Another time, I felt a tap on my shoulder while reading in the living room. I spun around, expecting my mom, but the room was empty. The air felt thick, like I'd disturbed something. I stopped reading in that room after that. The worst nights were when I was alone. My parents often left for evening errands, trusting me to watch the house and our dog, a scruffy mutt named Jasper, who was usually so calm he'd sleep through a thunderstorm. One night, when I was 16, I was in my office, a cramped room with a desk and an old computer, chatting with my friend Sarah online. The house was quiet, except for the hum of my music playing softly through the speakers. Then the phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID, 000000000. My stomach twisted. I picked up the receiver, expecting a prank or a glitch, but there was only silence, a heavy, empty kind that made my ears ring. I hung up and tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing. I went back to typing, but a few minutes later, the living room radio blared to life. It was an old thing, barely used, and I hadn't touched it. The static-filled crackle of an untuned station filled the house loud enough to make me jump. I ran to the living room and yanked the plug from the wall. The silence that followed felt worse, like the house was holding something back. Jasper started barking in the kitchen, a sharp, frantic sound I'd never heard from him before. I hurried to check on him, my bare feet cold on the uneven floorboards. He was standing by the back door, hackles raised, staring at the window that looked out onto the porch. I followed his gaze and froze. A shadow moved across the porch, a pitch-black silhouette of a man gliding from one end to the other. No footsteps, no sound of a car in the driveway, nothing. The porch light was off, but the shape was unmistakable, solid against the faint moonlight. It moved toward the front door. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. I backed away, whispering to Jasper to stay quiet, though he kept growling low in his throat. I typed a frantic message to Sarah, telling her what I'd seen, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the light. I needed my phone. It was upstairs in my bedroom. If something happened, I had to call for help. I forced myself to move, tiptoeing down the hall toward the stairs, singing softly under my breath to keep the panic at bay. The house felt alive, the air pressing against my skin like it was watching me. I reached the bedroom and flipped on the light, grabbing my phone from the nightstand. As my fingers closed around it, a loud "Bam!" echoed from the dark hallway behind me. It sounded like a fist slamming against a cupboard, sharp and deliberate. I spun around, but the hallway was empty, the shadows still. My legs shook as I backed toward the stairs, Jasper at my heels, his growls turning into whimpers. I bolted down the steps, nearly tripping, and ran back to the office, slamming the door behind me. I pushed the desk against it, my hands trembling so badly I could barely grip the edge. Sarah was still on the chat, asking if I was okay. I typed that I wasn't, that something was in the house. Then I heard it. Footsteps, heavy, uneven, like a crowd of people stomping across the floor above. It wasn't possible. The upstairs was empty, just a few bedrooms and an old attic. But the sound was unmistakable, a chaotic thumping that made the ceiling creak. Jasper barked again, his ears flat against his head. I turned up the music, blasting it to drown out the noise, but it didn't help. The footsteps kept going, relentless, like something was pacing, searching. I stayed on the phone with Sarah, whispering what was happening, my voice shaking. She could hear Jasper's barking through the call, her texts growing more frantic as she begged me to stay calm. I couldn't. I was sure something was coming for me, something that wasn't human. I curled up in the corner of the office, clutching my phone, Jasper pressed against my side. The footsteps didn't stop. Not until I heard the crunch of gravel outside, my parents' car pulling into the driveway. The moment their headlights swept across the windows, the house went silent. The footsteps stopped. The air lightened, like a weight had lifted. My parents walked in, calling my name, and I stumbled out of the office, tears streaming down my face. I tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled. They checked the house, found nothing, no signs of anyone upstairs, no marks on the porch, no explanation for the radio or the phone call. The front door was still locked, the windows untouched. I never felt safe in that house again. Every creak, every shadow made my heart race. The farmhouse was torn down a few years later, the land left empty. But I know what I felt, what I heard, what I saw. Something was there tied to that place, something that didn't want us there. And I'm certain it wasn't human. Story 8. The Cursed Scarecrow of Loomis Farms. I am the Scarecrow of Loomis Farms, bound to these desolate fields by a curse forged in blood and betrayal. My straw-filled limbs creak in the wind, my burlap face frozen in a silent scream. Once, I was nothing more than wood and cloth, a guardian of corn under the Pennsylvania sun. Now, I am something else, something alive, something vengeful. The spirit of Old Man Loomis courses through me, his rage my heartbeat, his curse my purpose. I see through glowing red eyes, feel through gnarled wooden fingers, and hunger for those who dare trespass on this forsaken land. This is my story, woven from the terror of those who've crossed my path and the screams that echo in the night. The first trespasser, 1935. The farm was still smoldering when the first fool came, a boy no older than 16 with a lantern and a grin, thinking the tales of the Loomis massacre were just that, tales. The townsfolk whispered of the gunfight, of Old Man Loomis's final curse as bullets tore him apart, his body slamming into me, splintering my frame. They said his blood soaked into my straw, his soul trapped within. The boy didn't believe it. He came on a dare, his boots crunching through the frost-bitten corn stalks. I stood motionless, as I always do when the living approach. My burlap head sagged, my tattered coat flapping in the breeze. He laughed, kicking at the dirt near my base. "Just a dumb scarecrow," he muttered, his breath fogging in the chill. But I felt him, the warmth of his life, the pulse in his veins. Old Man Loomis's rage stirred within me, a fire that burned hotter than the farmhouse had. When he turned to leave, I moved. My wooden arms snapped upright, straw crackling like breaking bones. My eyes blazed red, casting a crimson glow across the field. The boy froze, his lantern slipping from his hand, shattering on the ground. I lunged faster than any man could run, my burlap hands clamping around his shoulders. He screamed, but the cornfield swallowed the sound. His bones creaked under my grip, his eyes wide with terror. I didn't kill him, not then. I wanted him to spread the fear, to warn others. I hurled him toward the road, his body tumbling through the stalks. He ran, sobbing, never looking back. That night, the legend of the cursed Scarecrow grew. The thrill-seekers, 1952 years passed, and the farm decayed. The fields grew wild, the barn collapsed, but I remained untouched by time. My straw never rotted, my wood never splintered. The curse held me together, a monument to Loomis's wrath. By the 1950s, the farm was a dare for the bold and the reckless. A group of 4 came one October night, their flashlights cutting through the fog. They were older than the boy, hardened by war stories and bravado, thinking nothing could scare them. They found me at the field's heart, my silhouette looming against the moon. "That's it," one sneered, a tall man with a scar on his cheek. He yanked a knife from his belt and slashed at my arm, tearing burlap and spilling straw. The others laughed, but their voices faltered when the straw writhed on the ground, slithering back to my frame, knitting itself whole. I felt their fear spike, sharp and delicious. The tall man stepped back, his knife trembling. I sprang to life, my eyes igniting, my body lurching forward. The group scattered, screaming, but the field seemed to twist around them, the corn stalks bending to block their paths. I caught the tall man first. My hands closed around his throat, lifting him off the ground. His knife fell, useless. His friend's shouts faded as I crushed him, his ribs snapping like dry twigs. I didn't stop there. One by one, I hunted them through the maze of corn. The woman tripped, her ankle twisting, I dragged her into the stalks, her screams cut short. The others tried to climb the fence, but my strength was beyond theirs. I tore them down, their blood soaking the earth. By dawn, the field was silent again. Their bodies vanished into the soil, consumed by the curse's hunger. The town spoke of missing persons, but no one dared search the farm. I stood still, waiting for the next. The Paranormal Hunters, 1978. The world changed, but fear remained. By the late 1970s, the farm drew a new kind of intruder, paranormal hunters, armed with cameras and gadgets, chasing proof of the supernatural. 3 came one autumn dusk, their van parked at the rusted gate. They wore jackets with logos, carried heavy bags, and spoke of energy readings and residual hauntings. They didn't know what they were facing. I watched them approach, their lights flickering across my burlap face. The leader, a woman with short hair, set up a tripod near me, her device beeping. "This is the epicenter," she said, her voice steady, but her pulse racing. They tried to burn me first, dousing me with gasoline. The match flared, but the flames slid off my straw like water, leaving me untouched. Their confidence cracked. I moved when the sun dipped below the horizon. My eyes glowed, my body jerking upright. The woman shouted, her camera falling as I grabbed her arm. Her skin was warm, her fear electric. The others ran, but the field trapped them as it always did. I crushed the woman's device underfoot, then her. Her companions fared no better. One man swung a crowbar, striking my chest. The metal bent, and I tore him apart. The last hid among the stalks, whimpering, but I found him. My hands closed around his skull, and the curse fed. Their van stayed by the gate, abandoned. The town called it a hoax gone wrong, but the whispers grew louder. No one could destroy me. No force could end the curse. The Lost Child, 1994. Not all who came were thrill seekers. One autumn, a child wandered onto the farm. A girl no more than 8, her coat torn, her cheeks streaked with tears. She wasn't here on a dare. She was lost, calling for her mother. Her voice was small, her fear pure. Old man Loomis's rage stirred, but something in me hesitated. I remembered Harley Loomis's son dying by my side, his blood pooling in the dirt. I stayed still, my eyes dark, as she stumbled closer. She saw me and froze, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "Mr. Scarecrow," she whispered, her voice trembling. I felt the curse urging me to act, to crush, to feed, but I didn't move. She sat at my base, shivering, talking to her rabbit about home. Hours passed, and the curse screamed within me, demanding her life. I resisted, my straw trembling. At dawn, a search party found her, curled up asleep by my post. They carried her away, and she looked back, waving. "Thank you, Mr. Scarecrow," she said. The curse burned hotter, punishing me for my mercy, but I endured. That night, the field shook with my rage, corn stalks snapping, but I spared her. She was the only one. The Final Trespasser, 2025. Now, it's tonight, and you're here. I feel your footsteps, heavy and hesitant, crunching through the frost. Your flashlight sweeps across the field, landing on my burlap face. You're alone, aren't you? Maybe you heard the stories. The boy who ran, the hunters who vanished, the child who survived. Maybe you think you're different, braver, smarter. You're not. I stand motionless, as I always do. My coat flaps in the wind, my straw creaks. You step closer, your breath quickening. Do you feel it? The air growing heavier, the field closing in. You whisper something, a name, a curse, a prayer. It doesn't matter. Old man Loomis's rage is mine, and you're in my domain. My eyes ignite, red and blazing. My arms snap upright, straw crackling. You scream, and the sound feeds me. Run if you want. The corn will trap you. Fight if you dare. No weapon can stop me. The curse is eternal, and I am its vessel. You shouldn't have come to Loomis Farms. Story 9. The Haunted Farmhouse. The old farmhouse stood alone on a quiet country road in western New York, its weathered clapboard sagging under the weight of a century and a half. Built in the 1850s, it had seen generations come and go, but none left as fast as we did. My family, Mom, Dad, my younger sister Ellie, and me, Sam, moved in during the summer of my 12th year, chasing a fresh start after Dad's job relocated. The place was cheap, sprawling, and creaky, with wide plank floors and windows that rattled in the wind. We thought the quirks were charming. We didn't know they weren't quirks at all. The first sign came a week after we settled in. I was unpacking my comic books in the attic bedroom I'd claimed when I heard a scraping sound downstairs. Not loud, but deliberate, like a chair sliding across the kitchen floor. I froze, listening. Mom was at the grocery store, Dad was at work, and Ellie was outside with our tabby cat, Muffin. I crept to the top of the stairs and called out, "Ellie?" No answer. The house was still, but the air felt heavy, like someone was holding their breath. I tiptoed down to the kitchen, my socks silent on the worn wood. One of the oak chairs at the table was pulled out, angled toward the doorway like someone had just stood up. I pushed it back in, my heart thudding, and told myself it was nothing. Old houses shift, right? That night, Ellie couldn't find her favorite stuffed horse. She tore her room apart, sobbing, while Mom and I searched under the bed and in the closet. "It was right here," she wailed, pointing to her nightstand. We gave up after an hour, promising to look again in the morning, but when I passed her room on my way to bed, I stopped cold. There, on her pillow, was the stuffed horse, its glass eyes glinting in the moonlight. Ellie was already asleep downstairs on the couch, refusing to come back up. I didn't touch it. I just backed out and shut the door. The next morning, Muffin started acting strange. She'd perch on the living room windowsill, her tail puffed, hissing at the empty yard. Once, she bolted across the room and clawed at the air, her eyes locked on a spot near the fireplace. Our dog, Rusty, a burly mutt who'd never met a stranger, wasn't much better. One evening, he stood at the foot of the stairs, hackles raised, barking at nothing. Dad laughed it off, saying, "He's just spooked by the new place." But Rusty's barks weren't his usual playful yaps. They were deep, guttural, like he was warning something to stay back. A few nights later, I woke to footsteps, slow, heavy thuds pacing the hallway outside my room. I lay still, my blanket pulled to my chin, counting each step. 1, 2, 3. They stopped right outside my door. I waited for the knob to turn, for Dad to check on me like he sometimes did, but the door stayed shut, and the silence was worse than the sound. I don't know how long I stayed awake, staring at the crack under the door, but nothing moved. At breakfast, I asked if anyone had been up. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance. "No, Sam," Mom said, her voice tight. "We were all asleep." Ellie started sleeping in my room after that. She said she didn't like her room anymore, that it felt wrong. One night, I woke to her whimpering in her sleeping bag on the floor. "Sam," she whispered, "there's someone in here." I sat up, my eyes darting to the corners of the room. Moonlight spilled through the window, casting long shadows. but nothing moved. "It's just a bad dream," I said, trying to sound brave. Then I saw it. At the foot of Ellie's sleeping bag, a pale shape crouched low, its edges blurry like fog. Headless. I blinked, and it was gone. Ellie was crying now, her face buried in her pillow. I didn't tell her what I saw. I couldn't. The next morning, I found Ellie staring at her bedroom wall, her face pale. Every horse picture she'd taped up, dozens of them, her pride and joy, was torn down, scattered across the floor in jagged pieces. "I didn't do it," she said, her voice small. "Mom thought it was a tantrum, but I knew better. Ellie loved those pictures. She wouldn't have touched them." Things got worse after that. Objects kept moving. Keys left on the counter would show up in the basement. My sneakers ended up in the attic. Once, I found my sketchbook open on the kitchen table, a crude drawing of a girl with wild hair scrawled across a page I hadn't touched. The pencil was still warm, like someone had just set it down. I threw the book in the trash, but the next day it was back on my desk, the drawing gone. One dawn, I woke to a chill that didn't belong in summer. My breath fogged in the air, and there, at the foot of my bed, stood a girl. She was maybe 8, her hair tangled and wild, her arms outstretched like she was reaching for me. Her eyes were empty, not blank, but hollow, like they'd seen too much. Ellie was asleep beside me, her chest rising and falling. I wanted to scream, to shake her awake, but my body wouldn't move. The girl's lips parted, and a sound came out, not a voice, but a low hum that vibrated in my bones. Then she was gone, and the room was warm again. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Ellie saw her too, eventually. She didn't say much, just pointed at the corner of the living room one afternoon and whispered, "She's there." I didn't look. I didn't need to. By then we all felt her. Mom stopped humming while she cooked. Dad stayed late at work, his jokes replaced by silence. Even Rusty wouldn't go upstairs anymore, whining at the base of the steps. The worst came late one night. I was half asleep when a weight pressed on my chest, like hands pushing me into the mattress. I opened my eyes to shadows crawling up the walls, twisted humanoid shapes with 2 long limbs. They didn't have faces, but I felt them watching. I tried to scream, but my voice was gone. Across the room, Ellie thrashed in her sleeping bag, muttering, "Get off! Get off!" The shadows slid toward her, and I finally found my voice, shouting her name. The weight lifted, the shadows vanished, and Ellie bolted upright, gasping. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. The next day, I overheard our neighbor, an old man with a limp, talking to Dad in the yard. "That house has always been trouble," he said, his voice low. "Folks say a girl died there long ago, never left neither." Dad brushed it off, but I saw his hands shake as he lit the grill that night. The final straw came a week later. I was in the basement looking for a box of my old toys when the light flickered. A shape loomed in the corner, a dark humanoid mass taller than Dad with no edges, like it was made of smoke. It didn't move, but I felt it staring. Upstairs, Rusty started barking, and Muffin yowled like she'd been stepped on. I ran, tripping over the steps, and found Ellie in the kitchen, her eyes wide. "It's in the doorway," she whispered, pointing behind me. I turned, but nothing was there. The air was thick, though, like it was pushing back. We left the next day. Mom packed our bags while Dad called a realtor. We didn't wait for a buyer. We just went. The farmhouse still stands, its windows dark, its secrets buried in the walls. I don't know who lives there now, if anyone does. I don't want to know. Story 10. The Baldoon Mystery. I am the land of Baldoon, a stretch of earth near Wallaceburg, Ontario, where the MacDonald family carved out a life in 1829. My soil is rich, my fields wide, but I hold secrets no plow can unearth. The story I tell is not one of warmth or harvest, but of a shadow that clung to this place, a force that turned a simple farm into a crucible of fear. Listen closely, for the events I recount are etched into my memory, drawn from the whispers of those who lived them and the scars they left behind. The MacDonalds arrived in the spring, their hands rough from building a new life. John, the father, was a man of grit, his wife Jane a quiet anchor, their children a mix of hope and curiosity. Their log house stood sturdy, the barn a testament to their labor. But I noticed something amiss before they did. The air grew heavy, not with storm clouds, but with something older, sharper, a presence that didn't belong. It began in the barn. Heavy wooden beams, hewn from my forests and set firm by calloused hands, crashed to the ground without warning. Farm hands scrambled, their shouts swallowed by the thud of timber. No wind, no quake, no reason, just chaos. They checked the supports, found them untouched, yet the beams fell again the next day and the day after. Men dove for cover, their courage fraying like old rope. Whispers spread among them. Something was wrong with this place. Night brought no relief. In the kitchen, as the family huddled by the hearth, a sound invaded their home. Footsteps, not one pair, but dozens, marching, deliberate, invisible. They paced the room, heavy as soldiers, circling the table where Jane clutched her youngest. The children froze, eyes wide, as the steps echoed through the walls, relentless, night after night. John searched the house, lantern in hand, but found no intruders, no tracks in the dirt outside, only the sound mocking their sleepless vigil. One afternoon, the terror took a new shape. The baby's cradle, carved with care and set by the window, began to rock, not gently, as a mother's hand might guide it, but violently, lurching side to side. Jane screamed, rushing to her child. 4 men, John, 2 farmhands, and a neighbor, grabbed the cradle, their combined strength pitted against the unseen. They strained, muscles taut, but the cradle fought back, swaying until it stopped on its own, as if satisfied. The baby wailed, and Jane's face was a mask of dread. Then came the fires, not one but a dozen, erupting without spark or flame. Hearths roared to life, logs unlit moments before now blazing. A haystack in the yard ignited, sending farmhands scrambling with buckets. They doused the flames, only for another to flare in the barn, then the kitchen, then the field. No pattern, no cause. The family stood watch, buckets in hand, but the fires mocked their efforts. Vanishing as quickly as they appeared, I felt the heat sear my earth, each blaze a wound I couldn't heal. Stranger still were the objects that attacked the house. Rocks, smooth as river stones, pelted the walls in broad daylight. Bullets, spent, their casings marked, flew from nowhere, striking windows and doors. John collected them, tossing the stones into the river, burying the bullets deep in my soil. Days later, they returned. The same stones, the same bullets, marked as before, lying in the yard as if taunting him. The family's eldest son, William, kept a diary, his word trembling across the page. The stones know us. They come back. The MacDonalds were breaking, Jane's eyes grew hollow, the children clung to her skirts, and John's temper flared at every new assault. Neighbors spoke of a curse, a grudge woven into the land itself. A local woman, known for her keen sight into things unseen, came to the farm. She walked my fields, her hands tracing the air, and spoke of a darkness born of envy, a neighbor's spite turned sour. She pointed to the old field where black geese gathered, their eyes glinting like polished coal. One of them, she said, carries the weight of this malice. John didn't hesitate. He took his rifle, loaded a single silver bullet, rare, costly, a relic of old tales, and stalked the field. The geese scattered, but one lingered, its movements unnatural, as if daring him. He fired. The bird fell, and the air shifted, lighter, as if a held breath had been released. That night, the footsteps ceased. The cradle stayed still. No fires sparked, no stones flew. The children slept, their soft breaths a fragile peace. For years the farm stood quiet. The McDonalds rebuilt their lives, though they never forgot. William's diary, shared with newspapers, told of those haunted days, each detail a thread in a story too strange to dismiss. The house itself is gone now, burned in 1930, its ashes mingling with my dust. But I remember. The weight of that presence lingers in my soil, faint but unyielding, a reminder that some grudges sink deeper than roots. Story 11. The Perron Farm. Haunting. My name is Carolyn Perron, and this is the story of the terror that consumed my family when we moved to that cursed farmhouse in 2008, Harrisville, Rhode Island, in the winter of 1970. I'm telling it now, not because I want to relive it, but because the truth of what happened there needs to be known. That place wasn't just a house. It was a trap, a living nightmare that sank its claws into us and refused to let go. We were a family of 7. My husband Roger, our 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April, and me. The farmhouse was a dream at first, a sprawling relic of New England history with creaking wooden floors and stone walls that promised a fresh start. It was isolated, surrounded by dense woods and fields that stretched into the horizon, but we loved the quiet. The price was too good to pass up, and we thought the quirks, its age, its remoteness, were part of its charm. We were wrong. The first warning came from a neighbor the day we moved in. He was an old man, his face weathered like the bark of the trees around us. "Leave the lights on at night," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. He didn't explain, just tipped his hat and walked away. I laughed it off, thinking it was some rural superstition. Roger rolled his eyes, muttering about small-town nonsense. But that night, as we unpacked boxes under the dim glow of bare bulbs, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, like someone was watching from the shadows. It started small. A few days after we settled in, I was in the kitchen washing dishes when a glass slid off the counter and shattered on the floor. I hadn't touched it. I chalked it up to uneven floors, an old house settling. But then Andrea, our eldest, complained about hearing footsteps in the attic at night, slow, deliberate steps that stopped when she called out. Roger checked, but the attic was empty, just dust and cobwebs. Still, the girls started sleeping with their doors open, their whispers carrying through the house after bedtime. By the second week, the air in the house felt heavier, like a storm was brewing inside the walls. One night, I woke up to a sound, a woman's scream, faint but piercing, coming from somewhere outside. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. Roger was still asleep, snoring softly. I crept to the window, expecting to see something in the yard, but there was nothing, just the black outline of the trees swaying in the wind. The scream didn't come again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it hadn't been a dream. The next morning, Nancy came downstairs, pale as a sheet. "Something moved my doll last night," she said, her voice trembling. She'd left it on her dresser, but when she woke up, it was sitting on the floor by her bed, its glass eyes staring at the ceiling. Cindy, the youngest, chimed in, saying she'd seen a shadow pass her window, a figure too tall to be human, she said, with arms that didn't move right. I tried to calm them, saying it was just the house playing tricks, but my own unease was growing. Then came the night that changed everything. I was asleep when a cold weight settled on my chest, pinning me to the bed. My eyes snapped open, and there, inches from my face, was the head of an old woman. Her skin was gray, her eyes sunken and black, her mouth twisted into a snarl. "Get out!" she hissed, her voice like gravel scraping against stone. I tried to scream, but my throat was locked. She vanished as suddenly as she appeared, leaving me gasping in the dark. I didn't sleep again that night, and in the morning I found scratches on my arms. 3 thin lines, red and raw, that hadn't been there before. I didn't tell Roger at first. He was a practical man, skeptical of anything he couldn't see or touch. But the girls were starting to notice things too. Christine woke up one morning with a bruise on her leg, shaped like a bite mark, though she swore nothing had touched her. April started drawing pictures of a woman in a long black dress, always with the same hollow eyes, standing in the corners of rooms. When I asked her who it was, she whispered, "The lady who lives here." We learned her name from the town records, Bathsheba Sherman. She'd lived on the property in the 1800s and died there, hanging herself from a tree in the yard. The locals whispered about her, saying she was different, that she'd been involved in things no one dared speak of. The records also told us about the house's history: 3 suicides, a string of violent deaths, and stories of others who'd fled the farm in fear. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was mounting, and it wasn't just stories anymore. The attacks grew worse. One night, as we sat in the living room, a book flew off the shelf and landed open on the floor, its pages flipping as if caught in a wind we couldn't feel. Another time, I found the kitchen chair stacked upside down on the table, perfectly balanced, when no one had been downstairs. The girls started refusing to go into certain rooms, the cellar, the attic, the back hallway, saying they felt wrong. Even Roger, stubborn as he was, admitted to hearing whispers in the night, words he couldn't quite make out, but that left him chilled. Then came the night Christine collapsed. We were eating dinner when she dropped her fork, her eyes rolling back in her head. She slumped in her chair, her body twitching, her voice muttering words that weren't hers, low, guttural, like something speaking through her. "I'll drive you out with death," she said, her voice not her own. We rushed her to bed, and she woke up hours later, confused, with no memory of what happened. But her leg was blooded again, fresh marks that looked like claws. We tried to leave, but it wasn't that simple. The house seemed to know when we planned to go. Doors would slam shut when we packed bags, windows rattling like they were laughing at us. Once, as I reached for the front door, a force shoved me back, hard enough to bruise my shoulder. The girls were terrified. sleeping in our room now, their eyes wide and hollow from lack of sleep. We were prisoners in our own home, and whatever was here wasn't done with us. The worst came on a night in late spring. I was in the kitchen washing dishes to keep my hands busy when the air turned cold, so cold my breath fogged. The lights flickered and a shadow moved across the wall, a woman's shape, tall and thin, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. I froze, the dish slipping from my hands and shattering. "You can't leave," a voice whispered right behind my ear. I spun around, but no one was there. Then I heard Andrea scream from upstairs. I ran to her room, my heart in my throat. She was on the floor clutching her arm, blood seeping through her fingers. "She grabbed me," she sobbed, pointing to the corner. There was nothing there, but the air was thick like it was alive. The other girls were awake now, crying, saying they'd seen her too. The woman with the black eyes, standing at the foot of their beds. We couldn't stay after that. We packed what we could carry and left at dawn, the house silent for once, as if it knew it had won. We never went back. The farmhouse still stands, empty now, its windows dark and its walls holding secrets no one should uncover. I don't know what Bathsheba wanted or why she chose us, but I know this: that place isn't just haunted, it's alive, and it's waiting for someone else to walk through its doors. Story 12. The Hinterkaifeck Horror. My name is Andreas Gruber, and I'm not sure how much time I have left to tell this. The air in this house feels wrong, heavy, like it's pressing against my chest. It's March 1922, and our farm in Hinterkaifeck sits alone, tucked deep in the Bavarian woods. The nearest neighbor is a good walk away, and the silence out here is so thick you can hear your own heart beating. Or maybe that's just my nerves. Something's been off for weeks, and I can't shake the feeling that whatever's coming is already here watching us. It started small. Footprints in the snow. I found them one morning, a trail leading from the edge of the forest right up to our house. Deep, deliberate steps, like someone had stood there staring at the windows, but there were no tracks leading away. I followed them as far as I could, but they just stopped, like the person had vanished into the air. I told my wife, Cazelia, and she brushed it off. "Kids from town, playing tricks," she said, but her eyes didn't believe her own words. Hinterkaifeck's too far out for kids to wander, especially in winter. Then the noises started. At night, when the wind was still, I'd hear footsteps above us in the attic. Slow, heavy creaks, like someone pacing. I checked the first time, climbing the ladder with a lantern, my hand shaking so bad the light danced on the walls. Nothing, just hay and dust, undisturbed. But the air up there felt wrong. Cold, even colder than the rest of the house, and it smelled like something sour, something alive. I didn't tell Cazelia about that. She was already jumpy, and our daughter, Victoria, was starting to notice her mother's unease. Victoria's got her own troubles. Her husband died in the war, leaving her with 2 kids, little Cazelia, 7 years old, and Joseph, just 4. They live with us now, and the house feels crowded, but it's better than letting them struggle alone. Victoria's strong, but I see the weight in her eyes. She's been hearing things too. Last week, she woke me in the middle of the night, whispering about voices outside her window. Not words, she said, just murmurs, like someone talking to themselves in the dark. I grabbed my rifle and went out, but the snow was untouched. No footprints, no nothing. Just the trees staring back at me, black against the moonlight. Things started going missing after that. A hammer from the barn, a knife from the kitchen. I thought maybe little Cazelia was playing games, but when I asked her, she swore she hadn't touched them. Her eyes were wide, scared, like she knew I wouldn't believe her. Joseph's been clingy too, crying at night, saying he sees a man in the house. Kids have imaginations, but this feels different. I caught him yesterday staring at the attic hatch, his little hands clenched into fists. "He's up there," he whispered. I didn't know what to say. The new maid, Maria, arrived 3 days ago. She's quiet, keeps to herself, but I can tell she's uneasy. She asked about the attic her first night, said she heard scratching up there like fingernails on wood. I told her it was rats, but my voice sounded hollow, even to me. She didn't ask again, but I've seen her glancing at the ceiling when she thinks no one's watching. I don't blame her. This house doesn't feel like ours anymore. Last night was the worst. I couldn't sleep, so I sat by the fire listening to the wind howl outside. Around midnight, I heard it again. Footsteps in the attic, louder this time, like someone wasn't even trying to hide. I grabbed my rifle and climbed the ladder, my heart hammering so hard I thought it had burst. The attic was dark, the lantern barely cutting through the shadows. I swept the light around, and that's when I saw it. The hay in the corner was pushed aside like someone had been lying there. And there, in the dust, was a single footprint. Not mine. Not anyone's in this house. It was too big, too deep, like it belonged to something heavier than a man. I don't know how long I stood there staring at it, the cold sinking into my bones. When I finally climbed down, my hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped the lantern. I didn't tell Cazelia. I didn't tell anyone. What could I say? That something's living in our house, hiding in the dark, waiting. They'd think I'm losing my mind. Maybe I am. It's evening now, and the house is quiet. Too quiet. The kids are in bed, and Maria's in her room. Cazelia's knitting by the fire, but her hands keep pausing, like she's listening for something. Victoria's in the kitchen washing dishes, but I can see her reflection in the window. She's staring out into the dark, her face pale. I want to tell them to leave, to pack up and go to town, but where would we go? This farm is all we have. And besides, I can't shake the feeling that it's too late. Whatever's here, it's not letting us go. I'm writing this by candlelight, my hands still trembling. I don't know why I'm writing it. Maybe so someone finds it, knows what happened to us if we don't make it through the night. The barn smells of hay and damp wood, but tonight there's something else, something sour like sweat and blood. I'm crouched behind a stack of crates, my breath fogging in the cold. Cecilia's beside me, gripping my arm so tight it hurts. Victoria's on my other side, her eyes darting toward the barn door. We didn't plan to be here. We didn't have time. It happened so fast. I was locking up the house when I heard it. A scream, sharp and sudden, cut off like a snapped thread. It came from the barn. I ran, Cazelia and Victoria behind me, their faces white with fear. We found the door ajar, the lantern inside flickering like it was about to go out. And then we saw it, the mattock, our own tool, lying on the ground, its blade slick and dark. Blood pooled beneath it, spreading across the dirt floor like ink. I don't know whose it was. I didn't look. I couldn't. We hid, instinct taking over. The barn's dark now, the lantern snuffed out. I can hear it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling the barn. They're not human. They're too heavy, too wrong. Cecilia's shaking, her breath hitching like she's trying not to cry. Victoria's whispering something, but I can't make it out. My rifle's back in the house. I left it by the door. Stupid, so stupid. The footsteps stop. Silence presses in, thicker than the dark. Then a sound, a low, guttural hum, like someone muttering to themselves. It's close, just outside the barn. I can feel it, whatever it is, standing there, listening, waiting. My heart's pounding so loud I'm sure I can hear it. Cecilia's nails dig into my arm, and I want to tell her it's okay, but I can't lie. Not now. The barn door creaks just an inch, but it's enough to let in a sliver of moonlight. I see it then, a shadow, tall and wrong, moving past the crack. It's not a man. It's too big, too bent, like something that shouldn't be walking upright. Victoria gasps, and I clamp a hand over her mouth, my own breath frozen in my chest. The shadow pauses, and for a moment, I think it's over. It heard us. It knows we're here. But then it moves on, the footsteps fading toward the house. I don't know how long we stay there, crouched in the dark, too scared to move. When I finally peek out, the yard is empty, the house dark and silent. Too silent. The kids, Joseph and little Cecilia, Maria, they're still in there. We creep back to the house, every step feeling like it'll be our last. The front door's open, swinging gently in the wind. Inside, the fire's gone out, the room cold and still, the breakfast table's set, plates untouched, like nothing's happened, but the air feels wrong, heavy with that sour smell. I call out for Joseph, for Cecilia, for Maria, but there's no answer, just silence. And that hum, faint now, coming from upstairs. Victoria's behind me, her hand on my shoulder. Cecilia's frozen in the doorway, staring at the attic hatch. It's open, just a crack, and something's moving up there, a shadow shifting in the dark. I grab a knife from the table, my hands shaking so bad I nearly drop it. We climb the stairs, each step creaking louder than the last. The hum's louder now, vibrating in my chest, and I can hear something else, scratching like fingernails on wood. Joseph's room is first. The door is ajar, and I push it open, the knife raised. He's there, on the bed, his little body still, too still. Blood stains the sheets, dark and wet, and I hear Victoria choke behind me. I can't look away. His eyes are open, staring at the ceiling, and his tiny hands are clenched, nails bloody like he fought back. I want to scream, to run, but my legs won't move. The hum stops. Silence crashes in, and then a laugh, low, guttural, coming from the attic. Victoria grabs my arm, pulling me back, but I can't stop. I have to know. I have to see it. The attic ladder's down, and I climb, the knife in one hand, my heart in my throat. The air up here is freezing, the sour smell so strong it burns my nose. The lantern's gone, but moonlight spills through a crack in the roof, and that's when I see it. It's crouched in the corner, hunched over something. Maria, her body limp, her neck bent at a wrong angle. It's not human. It's too big. Its limbs too long, its head twisted like it's not attached right. It's humming again, that low guttural sound, and it's eating. I don't know what. I don't want to know. The knife slips from my hand, clattering to the floor, and it turns. Its eyes are wrong, too bright, like they're glowing in the dark. It sees me, and it smiles, a wide, impossible grin that splits its face. I stumble back, my foot catching on the ladder, and I fall, crashing to the floor below. Victoria's screaming, Cecilia's gone, and the thing, it's moving, its footsteps shaking the house. I crawl to the door, my hand slipping in something wet. Blood, mine or someone else's, I don't know. The yard's empty, the forest dark and silent. I run, my breath burning, my legs heavy like I'm wading through mud. Behind me, the house is quiet, but I know it's there, watching, waiting. I don't know how long I run or where I'm going. The trees close in and the cold bites at my skin, but I can't stop. I can't. The farm's gone now. Burned to the ground years later, they say. But the stories linger. Neighbors whisper about the footprints in the snow, the voices in the dark, the thing that lived in the attic. They say the house was cursed, that something was wrong with Hinterkaifeck long before the Grubers died. No one knows what it was. No one ever will. But sometimes, on cold nights, when the wind is still, you can hear it, a low guttural hum drifting through the trees. And if you're foolish enough to follow it, you might find footprints in the snow leading to nowhere.